So we're going to begin in the Middle East with Vice President JD Vance, who's on his way to Pakistan ahead of those peace talks with Iran. Now, this fragile ceasefire, Kelly, as you know, appears to be holding for now, but the critical Strait of Hormuz is just one of several sticking points. Well, last night, President Trump posted this message on social media, writing, quote, "Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. That is not the agreement we have." According to marine transit data, only about a dozen ships have passed through the strait since the truce went into effect. That is far less than before the war. The vice president left from Joint Base Andrews about 30 minutes ago. Take a listen to what he had to say about this weekend's talks.
If the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The president has gave us some pretty clear guidelines.
All right, we're going to get to our top reporters. Oh, our top reporters, yes, in just one second. But we just got the CPI March report, right? This is inflation. It rose 3.3%. That's the highest that we've seen it in nearly 2 years. That's on an annual basis. That jump was driven by gas and energy prices. Gas in 1 month rose 21.2%. Fuel oil rose 30.7%.
So this is like, as you said, just so people understand, this is the first report that's come out since the Iran war started.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, I never want to throw the big R word around, but like, what does this portend?
Okay, so let's take the temperature down for a second, right? This was expected. I mean, 3.3, we don't want to see that number. It was 2.4 in February, so that's a really big jump. But as I said, it was driven all by energy. And we've been talking about this for a month, right? We talk about oil every day. We talk about gas prices. And that was really where you saw the big jump. Food, though, was flat. And so if you strip out,
what does that tell us?
Well, what it tells you is if you strip out energy, right, you strip out oil and all that, the inflation in the economy was actually pretty contained. And so that was really some good news. And that's why I say let's take the temperature down. But the concern is if this continues to go on, as we've talked about with diesel prices, when it becomes more expensive to transport your goods to the store, that's when you see your food prices go up.
So it does signal, Kelly, that if this war had not started, we would be in pretty good shape right now. But because we have this extra added volatility that's been injected into the markets, that's why we're seeing, at least in this particular sector, the energy and oil and gas sector, this huge jump, which is now affecting people at home, right? I mean, this is something that people are going to be dealing with. And it's not going to, even if those ships start flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, we're not going to see that return.
Yeah, very quickly,
soon.
right. And I think what's really interesting is, you know, the phrasing that you just used of, well, we would be in a pretty good situation without. And I do have to give the president credit because that's what he was saying all along. Like, look, inflation, it doesn't mean the prices are coming down, but inflation is moderating. But I go back to also what he said when he was running for office again, that he was going to bring inflation down. I think a lot of people are going to point to this report and say, well, because of something that we are doing in the Middle East, it's actually rising. And that's going to be a very tricky messaging to sort of play out as we go towards the midterms if this thing does drag on. The hope, though, is this is just a couple month thing.
And real quick before we get to Olivia and Rinaldi, how does this change or not change how the Fed's thinking about it?
It doesn't change, in fact, because the Fed has been on a wait-and-see approach. Remember, we got that jobs report last week. It was stronger than expected. Now they see inflation quite high. They're going to say, yeah, we're not doing anything with interest rates.
It does sound also that right now futures are flat, so maybe this has been sort of priced in. We'll see what happens when they open. Yep. All right, we'll be watching at 9:30. Meanwhile, let's get to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi, who's joining us to talk more about this and reaction from the White House. So what are you hearing from your sources, Olivia?
Well, good morning. It's good to be with both of you. No reaction just of yet. We have asked the White House their reaction to this inflation report. But you're right. This was expected. It was talked about, these high gas prices, high price of oil. But this is certainly not the numbers that they want to see. It is hard to message around high prices at the grocery store, high gas prices, and now this inflation number. It's similar to what the Biden administration had to go through, right? Remember how they were often saying, well, prices are coming down, but Americans just just don't always feel that. And our reporting suggests that inside the White House, there is genuine concern about high prices in the economy and how this is going to impact them in the midterms. We know the president himself has seen polling that shows his polling numbers on the economy are not doing well, and Americans do not feel well under his administration. So we'll have to see the impact of this and what the messaging changes. And of course, we know that the vice president is on his way to Pakistan for peace talks that could help sort of mediate these high prices if the Strait of Hormuz were to open up and we were supposed to see the flow of gas and oil to, try to get some of those prices down. But still, and Kelly can speak to this as well, this has reverberations through the economy that last over and over and over again for several months. It won't just turn off like that and all of a sudden prices will go down. So this will stay for a while.
Yeah, and so, you mentioned the piece about the vice president, going to Pakistan. More specifically, what do you think we can expect at these peace talks?
Well, I found it notable that the vice president, who just boarded and he just took off from JBA here in Washington for about a 16-hour flight to Pakistan, kind of left with a threat a little bit to the Iranians, saying that, if they're going to try to play the U.S., they're going to find that the negotiating team is not receptive. Vice President Vance also said that the president gave some pretty clear guidelines on what they are expecting to talk about and what the U.S. would like to propose. We know that one of those proponents of this deal could be about the enriched uranium inside of Iran. The vice president said yesterday that a central tenet would really be no enrichment of uranium and to turn over the nuclear fuel. That is likely to be a major sticking point for the Iranians in this negotiation. We know the vice president, is also being accompanied by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law for these diplomatic talks. And we know that there will be members of the diplomatic team who are going to stay in Pakistan to continue these talks, even if the vice president leaves later this weekend to come back to the United States.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi reporting from Washington for us this morning. Olivia, as always, we appreciate you.
All right, CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is following developments from Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, where those high-stakes talks will take place.
Well, all eyes are here on the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, as we anticipate those high-level talks, which really would be the most significant talks between the U.S. and Iran, high-level talks between the U.S. and Iran going all the way back to 2013 when President Obama called the then-elected Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Now, this, of course, is very different. This is at a time where tensions have never been higher between these two countries. Of course, after this nearly 6-week war along with Israel, it is now in this very shaky ceasefire. And I have to underscore shaky, given the fact that we have seen a lot of violence in places like Lebanon. In saying all of that, many here in Islamabad, at least, are expressing rather optimism that the two sides will come here to the capital, will have talks. The basis of those talks is pretty clear. The Strait of Hormuz, Iran's nuclear program, along Iran's ballistic missiles program, and indeed Iran's proxies across the region. Iran also has demands, including its ability to control the Strait of Hormuz, ending the war permanently, getting some sort of reparations for the violence that has been inflicted on their country, and indeed their nuclear program as well. Whether these two sides will be able to meet is anyone's guess, but the fact that they are talking is a huge step in a direction that many here in the region are hoping this conflict is moving. The Gulf, as we know, has suffered enormously during this war. The Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's energy passes through, that has been choked off, affecting so much of the world's economy. Many around the world simply want to see this war ended, but these talks, as we've been saying, are about as high stakes as it gets. Back to you.
All right, Imtiaz, thank you.